said we have this idea, and she finds us some money. We're excited to have her.
Good. Well, on behalf of Roane State Community College, I'd like to welcome each and every one of you. We have been hosting the EdTech Academy, and prior to that, course management system, summer academies for, golly, the past 12 years or so since I've been with the college. And it seems like each year we learn a little bit more. Each year we change it up a little bit. But we are very happy to have you all here today. And also joining us is Dr. Patrick Wilson. As many of you know, Patrick is the Vice Chancellor of the Regents Online Campus Collaborative, ROTC, whatever you want to call it. It's the statewide, for today. Changing soon, I'm here. But anyway, Patrick or some of his staff usually attend, and we're very glad to have you here today. So if you'd like to say a few words.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to be here, and I've been with the system for about 5 years now, and most years I'm able to make it here to Roane State for this event, and I love coming to this one. Unfortunately, it's not as common as it once was for our campuses to be able to do things like this with funding and I just wanted, I was thinking this morning about a few thoughts that I could share with you just briefly in a couple of minutes about the perspective from central office as far as what's going on in the state. And, it's a really been a consistent message in the 5 years I've been here, and it's changed with the Tennessee Promise, with the Reconnect that's now the next initiative from the governor for adults. We're continuing to try and look at different ways of meeting students where they are and making higher education much more accessible, which is really what online learning and technology and education have always been about. If you look at going back 15, 20 years, I know many of you have been in distance education and higher education for quite some time. That's always been what it's about. And so we're at a point in time, particularly here in Tennessee, where we're doing some really engaging and novel things that I think are going to significantly turn the needle in terms of higher education for the state of Tennessee. In addition to change, it's collaboration that is a key to our success here in the state. Particularly with technology, there is just too much to keep up on. There's no way any one person can know everything that's going on out there, and especially when you layer into it the new things like, last year it was MOOCs, and then there was the state reciprocity issue with federal regulation, and now, particularly here in Tennessee, we've taken a particularly hard look at accessibility and improving the educational experience, not only for individuals who have disabilities, but for everybody. And so we're making a concerted effort to change the way we think about accessibility, particularly here in the state of Tennessee, to look at it as a way to improve the educational experience and the resources for everybody. It's not for people just with disabilities. It's an affordance, an extra way of messaging our educational experience to all students who are engaged throughout the state. And I think it's going to offer some really exciting opportunities. A learning curve, a challenge for us, but that's good stuff, and that's invigorating. And I think that as we do more stuff like this, as we continue to kind of work together as a system on those things where it makes sense, we can leverage the strengths that we have at our individual campuses and throughout the system so that we can all benefit from it. So thanks for letting me join you.
Thank you.
Well, we are very pleased to have Dr. Tom Tobin here today to share with you all some wonderful tricks and tips on how you can do different things. And Tom Tobin is the coordinator of learning technologies at Northeastern Illinois University in Chicago. He is a nationally renowned author and speaker on issues of quality and distance education, including copyright in higher education, accessibility, evaluating online teaching, And our topic for the Ed Tech Academy this year, student engagement. Tom holds a PhD in English literature, a second master's degree in information science, the project management professional certification, and he is currently working on an online administrator certification. He tells his nieces and nephews that he is in the 35th grade. Tom's primary focus is on how to reach students whom higher education might otherwise serve poorly or not at all, because he used to be one of them. So today, talking to us about the 104 best practices and desire to learn, let's welcome Dr. Tom Coates.
Kathy. Let's keep that applause going for our hosts, Kathy. Fantastic. Well, I got a really good welcome from everybody this morning. I want to just double check and see if I've got this right. Let me see if I can do it. I've got Melinda, Valerie, Marianne, Adolph, George. Stephen, you moved. You were sitting over there.
I moved him.
Okay. Kathy, Elizabeth, Leisha, Alice, Crystal, people I don't know yet. Sungi, give me a second. Brenda, Don, my 3 math people. Susan, Mary, and Margaret. Daryl over there. Nikki, you guys moved. Let's see. Paul, Mike,
Wow.
Leslie, Rachel, Josh. I haven't met you yet. Yes, I have. Rebecca. Oh,
I'm Terry.
oh, awesome. Good to meet you. Fantastic. I met some of you. Let's see. Rebecca, Rhonda, and Becky. You came in later. Dang. Okay. Let's see. Abby, Stella, Gloria, Mike. Guy I don't know yet. Shelly, whom I'll tell you about in 10 seconds. Let's see, Jill, Robert, a couple of people who came in. Let's see, Susan, Mike, Kathy, you came in later. Patrick, Julie. Oh, I'm doing okay, aren't I? Let's see. By the way, if you come to my session and excuse me, later on, and you will, I will show you how to do this. This is not a photographic memory thing. This is a party trick. So please come to the next session. But I also want to share with you, just before we get going, a little bit of the Tennessee welcome that I've received. Rhonda Varner Gregory, who's here. Apparently we're going out to dinner last night at the other place. Anybody know this place? Okay, heard of it? Okay, they have an item on the menu called the Tobin, which is like a burger this big, and then they have a menu item called the Tobinator, which is a burger that you cannot actually fit in your mouth. Also, I feel very, very welcomed. I can't tell you how many people I introduced myself to this morning whose first words were, welcome here, we're glad to have you, so thank you very much. Let's actually get started, and to do that, let me just flip over to this other presentation here. And I told you I was going to talk about Shelley here in a second, and this is a great way to start, and I apologize for calling you out, but she says, where'd you grow up? I know some Tobins in Western New York. I grew up in Buffalo, New York. So we figured out that Shelley and I are 4th cousins. So I have relations in the room, which is awesome. So if you see those evaluation sheets on here, just start filling out all the 5s because it feels real good right now, right? But I want to talk to you about 104 best practices in desire to learn. And a lot of these things, my hope is that you already know them, that you are also willing to try a few things that will only take you a couple of minutes, and that you have an internet-connected device with you. This is probably the only time that the professor is going to say, please turn your phones on. You're not going to need them right away, but I say right up front, let's take a look at them. So how do I cover 104 things in an hour? Well, I grew up in New York, so I can talk fast. So how about 23 minutes? My idea here is not to teach you 104 things, but to give you an idea about 104 things. And I've got 14 minutes past the hour. Let's see how we do. So, Sorry. Under icebreakers, first off is a discussion topic. When you are starting up a class, whether it's face-to-face or online or some other method, ask your students to tell you something about them that other people don't already know. This guy collects beer steins. You'd never know that unless you ask. Do an audio intro. The learning management system has a feature whereby you can record up to a minute of audio just for fun, and people hearing your voice gives you more presence there. 10-second video. Ask your students to take that selfie camera and turn it on themselves and introduce themselves in 10 or 15 seconds. 10 or 15 seconds is a long time, but it makes you think about what you want to share with the rest of the class. Also, most recent picture, this is me back in Buffalo at my very favorite fast food restaurant, Mighty Taco. If you've never been, I highly recommend Mighty Taco. Separated at birth. These are two famous people. First is Mike Tomlin, coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the second one is... No, not me. Omar Epps, yeah. The famous actor. We've never seen him in the same place. We think Omar is actually the coach. Cartoon Me, there are apps out there where you can take a picture of yourself and turn it into a cartoon. Why is this helpful? Because many students don't want their own picture online. Whether it's for religious reasons, or they don't like the way they look, or they've had a stalking incident recently. So you go the gamut of reasons why, but if you want to do an image or put a picture of a butterfly up there or cartoon yourself, it's a happy thing. Blog sharing. The learning management system has a blog tool for every individual, and no one is using it, I can guarantee you right now. But using that blog tool for class reasons, if you ask students to do something, they'll do it. So that's a way for you to get into what your students are doing, and it's just between you and the students. Real-time chat, there's also a chat feature. For those of your students who are on military deployment, they're working parents who need to put the kids to bed, they're remote from the campus, they're studying at another campus location, and you happen to be here, having that chat is a good way to connect with students on their own time. Farthest and closest. Ask your students, where did you folks grow up? Where are you from? Where did you spend time? And have a little prize or some extra fun in the course for the person who comes from the most distance. What was your first job? Ask your students what their first job was. Tell your students what your first job was. This was my first job. I wasn't the guy with the shovel. I was the guy with the backhoe digging graves. So that was the very first thing I ever did. A couple of people said, oh man, I'm not sure I can trust this guy now. I saw the light go off right around Don. It wasn't Don, but it was around. Also, not my picture. Ask your students to post a picture of something that they care about, or something that represents them. You'll notice this is not me, but there's a family resemblance. You see the whiskers. Also, using YouTube. If your students have a YouTube account, or if your campus has YouTube or other video hosting, ask your students to post videos there. And you do as well. This is the easiest thing you can possibly do, because all it takes is your phone or a camera and upload it, and it's automatic instructor and student presence in your course. Also, rhyming introductions. This is one I don't terribly recommend. Introduce yourself in rhyming verse. Your students will think you're weird, but they already think you're weird, so prove it to them. So, student engagement. Here's another category after we get the ice broken. Virtual pizza and beer. How many of you folks in the learning management system have a thing called Q&A? Right, where students can ask any question? Don't be shy. You've all got it, right? Okay, lots of us. Here's the trick. Don't call it Q&A. Because when students see Q&A, they think, oh, I have to talk about the course, right? But if you call it something else, if you call it pizza and beer, if you call it tiki lounge, if you call it the hangout, whatever it is, they'll get curious about what's in there, and they'll actually come in and use it. Peer lead, this is where you ask one of your students to lead a discussion, lead a conversation, talk to a study group in your online course. This helps the students to stay engaged because it forces them to talk to each other, something that they sometimes will do in class and sometimes won't. I know all of my nurses over here, all my business people over here, all my math people over here. You guys get together and talk. Your students sometimes don't. Also, one paragraph report. This is, for those of you, I heard somebody teaches creative writing. This is something I stole from my creative writing people. And a one-paragraph report, ask your students not to write that 3-page paper, but distill it down into 5 sentences. as a pre-thinking exercise, especially when they're working online or they have enough time to work on homework. Even if you're teaching a face-to-face class, ask them to send you their distillation of the ideas and thoughts in the course, and it's going to come out better at the end of it. Even you math people can do this. So, super mini quiz. This is why I said math people, because they taught me this. If you're teaching a particularly difficult subject and you want your students to demonstrate the skills, ask them about those skills one little tiny piece at a time. If you have a quiz that has 50 items on it, your students will be at question 40, number 42, and they will say, where did I put the beer? Is the beer in the fridge, right? I need a drink. So, super mini quiz, you give them a bunch of different little bits at a time. Online learning management system really helps with this. Rewriting. This is the most humbling thing I've ever done because it squashed my ego, but I gave my students directions on all of the things that I teach them in my classes. And then I asked my students to rewrite my directions in plain English. It was humbling, all the things that they said, this is not clear, you need more information here. Ask your students to help you with this. And they'll figure it out too. Checklists. In the learning management system, there's a checklist tool where you can tell your students, hey, here are the things that you should do in this unit and in this order, and they can actually check a box that say, yeah, I read that, yeah, I did that, yeah, I took that quiz. Giving students a roadmap is one of the more powerful things you can do. Syllabus quiz. What do we do on the first day of class? We go over the syllabus with students. Don't do it. Give them the syllabus and tell them there's going to be a quiz about the syllabus online. And then, first day, actually get into your content. It helps an awful lot, and it puts the responsibility with the students. Class list tags. Students can see who else is in the class. They don't have identifying information like an email address, but they know people's first names and last names and a picture of themselves or a picture of a cartoon or the picture of a butterfly. So ask students to introduce themselves to each other by using the class list to send a message to another student. And then that student sends on and sends on and sends on, and you do it like a telephone game. Also, assignment rewrite. Craft the instructions for an assignment in your own style or someone else's. I started out as an English professor, and so one of my assignments was, here is a set of directions for the final project for our course. Please rewrite these directions as though you were Ernest Hemingway. And the student with the shortest directions got extra credit on it. And then it was, rewrite this as though you were Edgar Allan Poe. My students had me like killing them with blades coming down. So that's a fun way to engage students. Also take me with you. I have a lot of students at Northeastern Illinois who are active duty military deployed students, working adults. I had one student who was signed up to do the Iditarod sled dog race. And she was taking one of my classes. And she said, can I have a week off? And I said, sort of. And so it was, take me with you. If you're going to take the time off, at least post updates back to the class. It was a way to get the class solidified around something. Everybody was following her. She came in 210th, but she finished, which is more than a lot of people can say to the Iditarod. And the class really cohered around it. We were all cheering for Kathy. And it was a great way to keep students engaged on something that wasn't the class material. Calendar items. There's a calendar in D2L. You can use that in order to show students not only when things are due, but set milestones for them in the middle of things. Here's where you should be by this time in the semester. Here's where you should be with this. And give them little reminders that will pop up right on their main calendar. Devil's assignment, one of my favorite things to do. I didn't do it this morning, but I would have gone around and I would have said, hey, George, your task for our class today is you be the devil's advocate. Whatever I say, you say, that's baloney. Whatever I say, question. Be a skeptic, right? All you business people are going, we do this already, right? So, but have somebody who's your secret devil in the class, and then have that person reveal it at the end of the class that he or she was your secret devil. Progress check news. In the military, we've got a bunch of folks who served here. So if you remember this, just nod your head. First, we tell them what we're going to tell them. Then we tell them. Then we tell them what we've told them. That's a military way of getting information across. And we should do it in our news items, our announcements for class. where we're posting what's coming up, what's happening now, and then what you should have seen as it went by. And if you didn't, go back and check. Instructor presence, especially if you're teaching a fully online course, but even for the face-to-face. You folks who are in registration in various places, you've seen the student who says, I need to add this class or drop this class. And they say, what class are you taking? I think it's biology. Who's your instructor? I don't know her name. Right? She wears green a lot. Do you know that? And then the registrar goes, oh yes, that's Abby, right? In the writing center. So, but news items can really help in terms of instructor presence. You'll notice that I put a news item out there that just talks about what I'm doing. Most of my news items start, hey, it's Professor Tobin and I'm doing my laundry on Saturday and I wanted to check in with all of you. Make yourself into a human being for students. Also with discussion posts for instructor presence. Remember the rule of 1 to 8, so that if you are responding to every single student posting, you're not letting a conversation happen. But if you're not there at all, students will mutiny. They're like, where's the professor? So making sure that you're responding to about 1 in 8 or 1 in 10. And there's research that backs that up. You're letting things go, but you're actually still there. Audio clips. If you don't have a SoundCloud account, I'd encourage you to grab one. They're for free, and you can post, I think it's half an hour worth of free audio that you can cycle around. And there's a bunch of other places that can host audio for you too. If you are camera shy, like I'm not.
Tom, can I interrupt your discussion post?
George.
Is it any discussion or certain discussion? Is it content discussion or is it all discussions? I mean, when you say just jump in every 1 in a 10.
Let me respond in 10 seconds and then I'll give you a commercial. Sorry. The 10-second response is it's any response. It's way to go. Encouraging students, asking further questions, clarifying. As long as you're allowing students to talk with each other before they come up with ideas, questions, and things. The commercial, in your packet, you should have a handout that lists all 104 of these. At the end, you're going to vote for 3 of them, and we'll do a deeper dive at the end. So let's keep rolling here. Video check-ins. This is my colleague, Jane Keller. She's famous for doing little video YouTube check-ins in her yoga gear. Her students couldn't quite figure out why. Here's our professor, barely do this, like this, saying, hi, I'm checking into the class, and I'm falling over. So, but having that video check-in is a great way to personalize things. Also, voicemail. Remember back in the 80s when audio tape was so expensive that you could only leave a 20-second message on people's machines? Right? Give yourself that 15 or 20-second limit right now and give audio feedback to your students, and D2L allows you to do this. Whoops, back it up. Audio assignment feedback, this is what I'm talking about when you're giving feedback and you desire to learn. There's a button there that says record some audio, and you can record up to a minute of audio per student. And you don't have to even use the full minute. Just 10 seconds of, this is a strength, keep doing it. This is something to watch out for, and way to go, keep at it. I'm here if you need me. Audio lecture bits. If you have narrated PowerPoint slides, move over to audio only. You know why? Students going home on the bus with their junky 3G connections, they'll still be able to get it. Video lecture bits, the same idea. Video postcards. This is me talking about the impossible schedule that we have for May-mester. I understand some of you have the same problem. So I give my students little video postcards that are 30 seconds or less. Also discussion wrap-ups. This goes back to the tell them, told them idea. If you're not at the end of every conversation giving a wrap-up of what you heard, what students should understand, what students should be able to do now, you're missing an opportunity. And credit to everybody in the room, we all do this already in our face-to-face classes. So it's something that we can easily transition to online. Personalized feedback. I use a rubric when I'm grading a whole bunch of stuff, so students will see largely the same context and content from me. I always make sure that I have at least a few sentences at the end that talk about the student's particular situation. What are the strengths? Where can they get some opportunities? By the way, this next one's real easy. It's called My Picture in the Syllabus. This is where, if you have your students who say, I can't remember who my professor is or what he or she looks like, it's useful to have your picture in there so students remember what you look like. That's a presence kind of thing. Post everywhere at least once. This is a challenge, but it's a fun one, which means of all the tools that you use in the learning management system, make sure that you're posting every place at least once in a given unit. So you don't have to use every single tool in the learning management system. So for those all of you who heard you have to use everything they offer, no. Turn that telescope around. Only the tools that actually work for you. But definitely post everywhere at least once so your students see that you're there. Scavenger hunt, my very favorite thing. Ask students to get their butts out of their seats and go find a few things that are relevant to the topic that you teach. You dental hygiene people, this is real simple. You ask your students to go out there and find an x-ray machine. Okay, you laugh. Fantastic. Sorry. Bad joke early in the morning. Telephone game. Ask one of your students to summarize an idea or a piece of content from your course. And then ask that student to send an email to the next student with only the summary. You send the original, you send it to one student, and by the time it gets through the whole course, see what you got. It's a fun exercise, and it also tells students that they should be paying attention. Thought exercises, asking your students the hypotheticals. This is something that the learning management system is really good for, because when we have 50 minutes or 90 minutes in class, how much deep thinking do your students do? Right? Especially the ones in the back with their baseball caps pulled down over their eyes and they're checking the scores, right? But if you're working in a discussion online as a supplement to your face-to-face classes, or if you're teaching an online class, by default, your students have time to think. Switch thinking. If you ask your students to engage in a conversation that takes place online, and you just give them one prompt, and you say, talk about this one thing for the whole week, they will run out of steam on Tuesday. So have a few gates, mileposts, markers, switches of their thinking. Bring in new information. Ask them to come to a conclusion and then look at the opposite side or look at a different aspect of it. And that helps them in terms of interactivity. Opposites discussion, ask students to take a pro and con approach on things. Stop and think. You'd think this one would be the easiest one to do. This one's really hard. Asking your students to actually not read everything they're supposed to read. Stop at a certain point. If you're looking at a text, if you're examining content, if you're working through a mathematical proof, if you're going through a business case study, ask your students to stop at a certain point and predict what comes next. And this is something that the learning management system helps you do because it gives them time to reflect and think. Butts out of seats. I actually have a degree from the University of Butts Out of Seats. You can too. All you need to do is go to search University of Butts in Seats, and they'll give you a degree in any subject you want. You can print out the diploma right then and there. But I'm a big believer in the University of Butts Out of Seats. Even if you're using the learning management systems, don't have everything you're doing with your students be at the computer. Ask them to stop, log out, get up, get out of the house, go find something. I was joking about the x-ray machines, but being able to get out and see, observe, go to your local coffee shop and do the sociological experiment. Go talk to the owner of the local bakery and see what kind of business plan he or she has put together. Bring back real-world examples. That's really interactive. Also, look around you. When students are at their computers, one of the things you can ask them is, what kind of equipment do you have? Are you sitting in a local public library? Do you have your own? Are you a gaming nut? Do you have 16 different monitors going, day trading? Being understanding of the environments that students are in really helps. Build photo post. This up here is a piece of lined notebook paper with lots of arrows drawn on it and Post-it notes. Now, my colleague who teaches geography and environmental studies could have asked her students to diagram the condensation and precipitation process by using a piece of software. But what she asked for was actually physically draw it out and then take a picture of it and post the picture. What does that do? It's kinesthetic learning. It also shows you what the students actually know, and it doesn't presume that the students have skill with a piece of software. It just tests the skill. We'll talk about that in terms of universal design for learning later. Also, non-boring groups. If you let your students select their own groups, you'll get the math faculty over here, you'll get the business people over here, you'll get the right. Okay, we do it too. But asking your students to work in groups that are either randomly assigned, which your learning management system can help you do, or you assign the groups based on student characteristics. Also, chat. Asking your students to contact experts in the field, or you bring in a guest speaker is another really good way that the learning management system can help you, because you don't have to have that person standing physically in the classroom. That person can remote in. Also, quizzes about quizzes. I always try to give my students a quiz before a quiz, and the first one doesn't count for a grade, but it helps them level set. And my very favorite thing in Desire to Learn, in the discussions, a couple people are nodding here, must post before you can see other people's things, which means that you give the prompt, and then students don't see what everybody else wrote until they respond to the first one. Which means that cuts down on the, oh, me too, or he stole my idea, or she already said it. So, must post first. What you'll get is you'll get the one person who the discussion started on Sunday. That person will start on Thursday and go, where is everybody, man? Nobody started. I don't understand. So you have to tell your students that you're doing this ahead of time. Otherwise, some of them will freak out. Academic integrity. This is one of my areas of expertise, which is making sure that students don't cheat. But I like to say it the way of making sure that there is a climate of academic honesty on your campus. And use at least 3-to-1 pooling for all of your multiple choice questions. It doesn't mean that you have to have 3 different questions, just 3 different versions of it. And sanction statements. This actually moves the needle a lot in terms of getting students to act more honestly who might be tempted. Sanction statements are just, I am the person who I say I am, and I'm taking this test or quiz under the conditions that are supposed to be there, and I say that I don't have my book open, and whatever else you want to put in there. Sign here, please. You can actually make that question number 1 of your quiz, and the right answer is a fill in the blank, where you ask them to key in their full legal name. Is it a legal contract? No. Does it discourage cheating? Yes. Plagiarism checking, the big tools like Turnitin, and special browsers, things like Respondus Lockdown. I'm not here to sell other products. They do exist, though, and if you have a campus license, please take advantage of it. These are 2 of the things that lots of campuses administrators buy, and they say, this is great, we'll do it, and faculty tend not to adopt them very much. So it is literally clicking 2 buttons. So easy thing to do. There's also 3 different levels of academic integrity. First, there's trust. Here's somebody selling corn and put the money in the box, right? Certain things that we ask our students to do, we should just trust that they'll do it right. And if they do it wrong, does it matter? No. Weekly quizzes? I don't care. Well, I do. But in terms of, do I have to put the hammer down? No. Identify. So verification here, or excuse me, identification. How do you know that the student is the student when he or she is taking an online test or quiz? You can have the student's camera take a random picture of him or her. You can have the student verify by holding up a state ID and taking a camera picture and sending it to you at the beginning of the quiz. But for those things, those are midterm exams, big tests and papers, those kinds of things. And then verification, which is you actually want to have eyes on the person. Because there's nothing wrong with asking somebody to take a test or quiz that's a final examination under supervised conditions. If you don't have an agreement with other places for test proctoring, I think you do, actually. It's good. And so, yeah, what is it here? Sorry? Thank you, Becky. We've got testing centers all around the place, so there are no excuses for students who say, well, I don't live close to somewhere, right? And real-time monitoring. This is the one that costs you administrators, PBR folks, shut your ears here. This one. But this one, there are actually services where you can have a human being actually watching the student while the student is taking the test. Again, that's a couple of bucks. Also, view user progress. This is one of the tools in Desire to Learn that doesn't get a lot of use, but you can actually go see how long somebody spent on a test or a quiz, or spent looking at a document or a video or what have you. So if everybody else took 50 minutes on the test or quiz, and that person took 10 minutes, right? So also challenge questions. There are a number of identity questions, like when you apply for a credit card, it says, did you used to live on any of these streets? Is any of these a car you used to have? There's a service that will ask these questions before a student starts their final to verify identity. And I'm giving you this costs, and then this is free, right, kind of alternately here. Designed for application. Now, this one's a challenge for us, and it's more work for us as professors, but assume your students have the book open. Assume your students have the resources available to them. Design your questions by saying, on pages 80 to 85, it talks about cost recovery and balance accounting. Based on what you know from there, apply that to this scenario. And then there are holes, right? Either they know it or they got to really reread it quick. So expecting resource use, having those tests so that they have their resources open. Pick 3 elements. Here is the thing that you should remember if you remember nothing else. I'm giving you 104 things in rapid fire here. You can't do 104 things at once. Pick 3 of them. Try 3 things out and see what happens for you here. Text appearance, if most of your content that you support your courses with is all just text, you're missing the other 50% of people who want to see at least a couple of pictures in there. Follow this path. I try to tell my students, here's what you need to do first. Here's what you need to do second. Here's where you need to go third. And I like to give them a few different ways that they can move through the content in the course. Whether it's by watching a bunch of things, by listening to a bunch of audio, or by reading a bunch of text. Also, modules stop. D2L allows you to put together modules. D2L is a Canadian company, and so modules is Canadian for folder, right? And so you can make a subfolder of a subfolder of a subfolder of a subfolder, but students will get confused if you make it more than 2 levels deep. They'll dig down. I heard someone say an amen over here, right? If you make it more than 2 levels deep, they're just going to keep going and going and going, and then they'll forget where they were. Under usability, quick links in the content. You can put links to your discussions, to your quizzes, all those kinds of things everywhere in the course. But if you make links to all of those other tools in the content area, that means your students have to go only to the content area to follow along with your course materials. And they'll see the expected order in which they're working through the course. How many of you in our face-to-face courses do we think, boy, I have students come up to me in week 3 and they say, what are we doing? Where are we? I forgot to do the reading and I can't really follow along. This helps an awful lot. Same thing with make students stumble and some more most. Making students stumble across what comes next. Giving them the content, the ladder, the structure. Some more and most. Giving them a little tiny version as an intro, then the stuff, and then giving them a little tiny version as a summary at the end. This helps an awful lot too. Here's what you're going to learn. Here's the learning. Here's a review for you. And avoid mystery meat. I'm not sure if you can see it in the back, but this is the website for an ice cream company. It's put together like a bunch of pigeonholes in an old-timey desk. And there's a bucket of ice cream, there's a suitcase, there's a neon sign, there's a picture, an old-time picture of some people in front of an ice cream wagon, and those are all links. Do you know which one is about our product? Do you know which one is contact us? Do you know which one is history? Right? So you can put in a whole bunch of different links in Desire to Learn. Make sure you have some explanatory text for all of those links. Otherwise, you'll be using mystery meat navigation. By the way, put mystery meat navigation into your browser sometime. You'll have fun. Telling told, that's that military thing we talked about earlier. Ordering things for success, making sure that you give your students clear direction about where they're going in terms of interacting with you and with each other and with the material. Signposting is a way to say, by the way, at this point in the course, here's where you should be, and here's where you should go next. In fact, I usually just put literally a one-way street sign as an image, and then I say, here's a signpost. Here's where you should be. And I get a lot of students who come back and say, oh, thanks, this is great. Having agendas, giving students an understanding ahead of time for usability, and using checklists helps people to stay on track, especially people who are not text-based preference learners. There's no such thing as learning styles, but we do still refer back to, I like to read things, I like to see things. Universal design, we're going to talk about this later on, and it's Philip and Alice. Guys, raise your hands back there. Philip and Alice are going to be two of your facilitators for one of the sessions here at the conference for EdTech Academy. They're going to be talking about universal design for learning. I'm going to be talking about universal design for learning. Can you think, and Patrick just talked about universal design for learning. There's a theme. Okay, so universal design is a way to get content out there, not just for students with disabilities, but all students. So starting with text, once you have a script, you can play around with it. Creating that script means that you stop saying and you don't have to re-edit 17 different things as you're making multimedia with and for your course. Saying things twice. If you create some multimedia or you create a resource guide for your students, don't just give it to them once in the structure of your online course. Put it a bunch of different places. It's worth it. It's you. It's the good stuff. Alt text, if you ever put an image into D2L and you click the "This image is decorative" box, for shame. Not only did you just make it more difficult for students with disabilities to figure out what that image is, but you also made it so that students across the ability spectrum can't use those words in this box to search for your stuff. You're doing metadata here as well as universal design. Breaking things into pieces. We've got only so much time here today. I'm going to nick one of these. And on the schedule it says that we're going until, let's see, 11:15 or so. So we've got some time, right? But breaking things in pieces, if I were to take the video from this session and post it up online, and you told all your colleagues, I learned 2 things from Tom. By the way, that'd be awesome. I learned 2 things from Tom, and you should watch his content. How many of them are going to sit through that whole hour and a half? Nobody. So when you put your 50 minutes or 90 minutes worth of lecture capture up online for your students, who's going to watch the whole thing? Even the 3 people in your class who do watch the whole thing, they're going to want to go back to certain spots. And how do they get back to those certain spots? Well, it was at minute number 43 and 20 seconds, right? Right, I go back to that. By the way, in Star Wars, what was minute number 43 and 20 seconds? This separates the geeks from the geeks in the room, right? This is a nerd question. Robert is feeling the pressure. Are you a Star Wars fan? But he's looking up and to the right, so he's obviously accessing his mental database. Going, what is it? What is it? What is it? Do you want the answer, or do you want to be in suspense? May have to Google it. Okay, yeah, we'll talk about that in a couple seconds too. But it's, by the way, it's the beginning of the cantina scene. So you thought that was at the beginning of the movie. It takes them 45 minutes just to start the action element. Where were we? Printables. Universal design. See, this gets the discussion going. Talking about Star Wars, right? Printables. Make sure that everything in your course can be printed out. I know that the promise of online learning and the promise of supporting our face-to-face classes with digital stuff is that we're going to save the trees. We were all supposed to be in the paperless office 10 years ago, right? And what do we have? We have our own personal forest that we're building up on our desks. But being able to print something out means that students can take it with to places where they don't have internet access. And that's a real advantage. Also, more essays, ugh. If you're asking your students to write a 3-page report or an essay, think about what you are actually asking them to demonstrate. Are you asking them to demonstrate that they know how to use Microsoft Word, that they know how to set a 1-inch margin, do double space, put things in Times New Roman 12-point font? If that is the case, go ahead and make that the 3-page report. If that is not the case, give your students some alternatives. Give your students different ways to demonstrate the skill. Ask them to turn that selfie camera on their phone on themselves and give a report. Ask your students to do an audio of the business case that they're setting up. Ask your students to show you a process by recording their screen or recording what they're doing with the equipment that you're using or field. There is always a skeptic in the back who says, but well, how do I grade if some students give me the essay and some give me an audio and some give me video? If your objectives are the same and your objectives are not, you need to know how to write a business memo, then you should be able to apply those objectives to anything. By the way, that's one of the reasons why we're not allowed to keep gin in our desk drawers, because you get up to like student number 38 out of your 40-student class, and you're on the 38th 3-page report, and they're all the same format. You're like, oh, okay, I just got to get through a couple more of these, and then I can have family time and go home, right? So, doing the multiple means of expression is what Universal Design calls it. But giving your students options. Again, the asterisk there, if you're teaching business writing and they have to know how to do a formal email, and they know how to do the email subject and so on, then that's a format-specific thing. You have to do that. Transcripting things. If you're not in a position to be able to caption videos, at least have a transcript. This goes back to starting with text, and we'll talk more about that in the workshop that I'm going to do later on with you folks. Sing to me. Ask your students to... my music is going. This is perfect timing. So, by the way, what's the song? Oh yeah, let's leave with Mac. You're the one. Fantastic. I like it. All right. Sorry, tell them I like pepperoni and mushroom on mine. So, but sing to me, that was a great time. Sing to me is just asking students to give you information in a method that they're not used to giving. I had a professor in the business college at Northeastern who asked students to either sing or rap part of their assignment. And it wasn't the final assignment, but it was a little preparatory paragraph that he wanted to check in to see that students were on track with a big project. And he got those in, and he also saved a few of them and gave them to the next semester, and the next semester, and the next semester. So it's a library of things to do. This, by the way, is how to use D2L in a not terribly boring way. Accept more formats. If your students are able to get you something and you're able to open it and read it, go ahead and accept it. I know that this goes against what a lot of us were trained to do. If you're teaching, my math folks here, Mary and Margaret, are going, oh no, we can't do that. Because they can't. If their students are working in an SPSS or Maple database, or they have to use Excel, then make them use those tools. If your students can send you content in any other format and you are able to open it and accept it, go ahead and do it. You're going to see a lot of folks who maybe don't have Microsoft Office, maybe can't afford the full suite of tools that you're asking them to use all the time. Pointing outside, this just means don't make your course a hermetically sealed bubble. Ask students to look at content that's outside of your class. Talk to people who are outside of your class. Get outside of that little square picket fence. Play it again, Sam. This just means that if seeing something once is good, seeing something twice or 3 times is reinforcement. This, by the way, we do in our face-to-face classes every time students walk in, and we do a little recap of Q&A session. Chunking things, this is a very large amount of chocolate pieces, just to keep you engaged. And chunking things up. When we talked about the long videos, chop those videos down into 2 or 3 minute segments and say, this is video 1 of 10, 2 of 10, 3 of 10, so on and so forth. What's the advantage for students? They don't have to scroll through and figure out what happened at minute mark 40 minutes and 20 seconds like the cantina scene. And what's the advantage for us as professors? Let's say that we update our stuff, or something new happens in our field, or we just don't like that particular bit. How much do we have to re-record? The whole lecture? No, just 2 minutes. Kind of nice. Game-based learning, we're getting on toward the end here. Who am I? Give your students a few quizzes, mysteries to solve, things to find out. Also, we talked about secret devils. We talked about writing your own, which is asking students to come up with their own assignments and then give those assignments for the next semester's class. Play basketball or some other game, whatever game idea you have one part of your course be a way that students can work through the game. Do they have the Monopoly at the grocery stores down here? Builder and stuff? Okay. At the grocery stores, they up in Chicago, they have a Monopoly game. You get a big piece of paper that has Monopoly board on it, and then every time you spend $10 or you buy certain products at the grocery store, you get a little series of click-off stamps that you can collect and win prizes. Right? We haven't won a prize yet. We're this close to a $50,000 dream home. But we need one more. But having something that is related to, but not part of your course, keeps your students engaged. You will see that some students will be very competitive with it, and some students will say, I don't need that to really get into the course. But you're reaching out to all of those kinds of students. Also under game-based learning, invest in the syllabus. Give each of your students so much imaginary money. And ask them to bet on which part of the syllabus someone will forget first. It's my favorite thing to do, and the person who gets, the person or people in the course who actually get it right, they're the ones who can then explain that part of the syllabus for the rest of the class. Same thing with Monopoly money, asking your students to use fake money. Those of you in the business area, you guys gave me this idea. Lots of folks in the business college at our institution asked their students to take pretend money and invest it in the real stock market and see how they did. And same thing that you can do in your class. You can ask students to invest in other students. You can say to students, hey, this person gave a really good response. I want to give this person 5 of my investment dollars. And the person with the most money at the end of the course gets to add a question to the exam or get some other bonus. And so you see who your stars are, and people start competing for this money that doesn't really exist. Tag, asking students to work on projects, but take it only so far and then hand it off to the next person, the next person, the next person. Those of you who are wondering how you do groups online, that's how you do groups online. Don't ask your students to say, and you all come up with the way you're going to do this. Give them a structure to work through. Hidden keys, one of the things that I like is if you want to find the study guide for the midterm exam, you have to watch all 5 of these videos. And hidden somewhere in one of the videos will be a URL that will flash on the screen for 2 seconds. And that's the web address for the study guide. I see a couple people going, I could do that. That's really sneaky. That's awesome. Easter eggs. In video game design, Easter eggs are those things that are just fun but hidden somewhere. So I usually put a little text link way at the bottom of a series of lecture notes that's dry and boring. And the text link is something to some fun or a video or a resource that students can blow off some steam. I often send them to minute mark 42 and 48 and 20 seconds in Star Wars. And it works out really well. Bonus levels. This is another game theory idea, is that if your students do what you expect them to do, give them a way to go beyond. But don't call it extra credit or advanced study. Call it bonus level. By the way, this is me with a perfect 4 billion score in Lego Indiana Jones. I've got the Han Solo character, who's played by Harrison Ford, the same thing. So you see the theme coming. But giving students a bonus or extra, if you call it bonus, people will figure it out. They're like, oh wait, if I get a perfect score on these 4 quizzes, I can go into the bonus level and figure out more advanced stuff in the field. Or I can go into the bonus level and read what graduate students are working on. It's a powerful draw. Special characters, don't know if you can see, but these people are chasing a ball around through a park, and they have broomsticks between their legs running around. This is as close to people can get to play Quidditch from Harry Potter in the real world without actually being able to fly. But special characters, this goes way back to the very beginning of what we were talking about when we talked about cartoon reading. If you ask your students to respond from a point of view that's not their own, in face-to-face classroom, it makes them nervous. They think, why are we doing this role-playing? This is cheesy, right? But online, it gives them distance, and it allows them to respond more freely. The people who never speak up in class, the people who are even quiet in your online discussions, if they get to pretend that they're Wonder Woman or SpongeBob SquarePants or the Lone Ranger or Patrick, you get, sorry, it's the suit, man, it's really sharp. But if they get to pretend that they're somebody else and they respond from that perspective or that point of view, people are much more free and open with their ideas and their understanding. Also, badges. The idea that you can earn partial credit as you go through and track it with badges. We do this already in our regular face-to-face classes. We've been doing it for 45 years. We just haven't called it badges. We've called them grades. Badges are a way to demonstrate competence. Badges say, you got it. So if everybody who scores 80% and above on a weekly quiz, they get the badge for plaque cleaning, dental hygienists up there, right? They get the badge for business plan construction. And if you can collect enough badges, it means that you've earned more than 80% in the class, but it also tells those students and their next professors, these people have got the core skills. It's a shorthand way to show we've got the skills. And the last one is always be Batman. It says the most important thing in life is to be yourself. Unless you can be Batman, then always be Batman. And what I mean by this is always be the best version of yourself that you can. Give your students opportunities in your face-to-face classes. We do this all the time. We ask probing questions. We tell students, I want to see you succeed. We tell students it's okay to fail, it's okay to struggle. That's why you're in the seats and that's why I'm here to help you. But we don't often do it using our learning management system. And so putting that encouragement in there, putting those attaboys, way to goes, here's how you should be doing, and giving students an opportunity to come from whatever perspective they're bringing, that's going to be the highlight and the best thing we can do in D2L. So, getting from 104 to 3. Remember when I said at the beginning, please bring out your cell phones? Well, it's time. So we've got a little bit of time here to go. So please bring out your internet-connected device or your cell phone. We have plentiful Wi-Fi here on campus. And Susan?
Wi-Fi.
Okay, Wi-Fi guest is if you're not from Roane State or if you're coming up. All right, plentiful and freely accessible Wi-Fi. If you have a QR code reader, just point it at the screen, it'll take you right to. Or if you go to goo.gl/XQ, capital SP, capital PD. Take a few minutes and vote for your top 3. If you need a hand with what those 104 things were, it's in the handouts in the packet that you received. If you don't have one of those packets, look on with one of your neighbors. I know they're there. So let's take a couple of seconds. George, by the way, this is the reason why I answered you with a 10-second answer and not getting it. So we will get it.
Is there something you have? I mean, you asked us before, you know, it's something else.
The form is still there? You may need to tap on it again.
Mine was I would choose more than one from the same category.
Right, okay. I wonder if that's an Apple thing, because I know on Android devices you can choose a bunch. By the way, if you do need to vote more than once, I'm from Chicago, I'm used to that. So there's no problem there. Well, we have 66 responses out of 58 people. I think we've got it. All right. Okay, so I'm just going to scroll down through here. If the screen goes scrolling too fast for you, I apologize. I want to see, there's a good bit of voting going on here. I want to see where our winners are in most of these categories. There's a date. So this quiz, virtual pizza and beer so far. 8 for scavenger hunt. Usability, we're actually going to go into usability in a lot of our sessions later on, so we might not get into some of those. We're going to get a lot of votes here. Let's see, the badges is 9. Always Be Batman only got 2 votes. Man, all right. So it looks like we have a couple of clear winners here. So it looks like from the voting that's happened so far, and if you're still voting, I hope you vote for one of these. But with 9 votes each and 8 votes coming up, there's the syllabus quiz, scavenger hunt, and badges. And so for those of you who know the film Blazing Saddles, we'll start with badges.
I just said that.
Say it aloud.
So I can't do it. Badges, we don't need those stinking badges.
Yes! Remember that Blazing Saddles movie? By the way, that dates me. All this gray hair, you have no idea, ladies, how long it takes me to put it all the gray in just right every morning. So what I'd like to do with you now is I'm going to pop into my learning management system. With my super admin account. And let's actually take a look in a course. So here's a course in which other faculty members at Northeastern Illinois University are learning how to teach online, some of them for the first time, some of them as a refresher. And we do this as a 4-week, fully online course. And we use just about 104 different things in this course. And we ask our faculty members to choose 3 of the things that they have seen in the course in order to teach their own online courses. And so let's take a look for badges. If I go into our course content, what you'll see is, if I pull open the document, sorry about that, and this one I'm going to go down a couple of false roads because I'm prepared to talk about 104 things. And so, by necessity, your 3 votes are kind of off the cuff. So let's do some exploring together here. But in our lecture notes, we always say, we give them an introduction. By the end of this unit, you should be able to do these things. We go through our objectives. And I always start, when we're doing badging, with a story. So this is a trip to the Department of Motor Vehicles. What happens when you go to get your license or renew your driver's license, and try to get people in the... Somebody's laughing. Did you go to the DMV recently?
Yeah. You're hateful.
Rebecca, tell me more about so you went to the Department of Motor Vehicles. They are hateful. What happened?
That was nice.
I'm very sorry to hear that you had a poor experience at the DMV, especially since in ours, setting up your online course is like telling your friends about your time at the DMV. Please sanitize for your students. But in terms of setting up your online course, Rebecca is actually saying what a lot of faculty say about setting up an online course. There's so much work. I've been teaching in my discipline for 15 years, 20 years. I know what I'm doing in the classroom, and now you're saying I have to make all these extra things. And that's why I adopt that try 3 things model. I don't want you to walk away from our session today and say, Tom Tobin came to our campus and he said, we have to do 104 things or we are poor teachers. No. Tom came to your campus and said there is a universe of possibilities out there. And if you try 3 of them, you are on the right road. You are on a good road here. So let's go back to badging here. I always start out with a story, and the badge for this unit doesn't actually say syllabus design. It's not a badge for syllabus design. You'll see other folks who have badges. My badge is I survived the DMV. And it's got a picture of a clerk and a stamp. right? A rubber stamp. Please, if any of you have loved ones who work for the Department of Motor Vehicles, this is meant to be a caricature. But the badge here is I survived the DMV, and then in the evidence for the badge, it says setting up an online syllabus is like going to the Department of Motor Vehicles. You have to have all your forms correct. It is itself, the syllabus, a giant form that students sometimes read all of and sometimes don't. As I was walking around trying to learn everybody's names, somebody in the back here, I think it was Margaret, said, "You're writing our names down on the back of your W-9 form?" And I said, "Yeah, I don't read that. I read this part." Right? But the badge actually is something that is relevant to the content in the class. And no matter what subject you're all teaching, that content in the class, you can express it in ways that get at, I have mastered this particular subset of the skills. And you can put a badge to it. And you don't have to use a badging service like Credly or like Mozilla Backpack, or there's lots of technology-related kind of stuff. You can give students badges just by creating an item in Photoshop or grab a badge icon from clip art collections, and you can put text underneath it, and you can say, I'll email you this, or I'll keep track of you earned this badge or that badge. And then at the end, have something meaningful for people who collect a certain number of them or a certain collection worth of them. Here are our experts in case law. Here are our experts in polynomial proofs. Here are our experts in such and such and such. You people have earned the right to do some other thing. I hate extra credit, by the way. Just a little diversion here. And I hope you do too. Because extra credit is, I didn't have enough time to do the work you're asking me to do, so please let me do more. I never understood that. But if students earn something, then there are a lot of ways that we as faculty members can honor those badges. We can give those students the opportunity to write a question for the exam. We can give those students early access to a test or quiz. We can give those students an opportunity to be the professor for a day and share what they know. So there's a lot of ways that you can honor that without giving extra credit. So that's badges. And you folks have been a great audience. It's been kind of interactive, but I've been kind of talking at you for 104 things. We have some time while we're doing these three. Do you have ideas for how you might do badging or questions about badges, especially if you're one of the people who voted for it? Yes, please.
I was just sharing with Beth. Beth is the PTA program director here at Roane State, and I'm the program director for OTA. And this, I think, has tremendous application for our students in terms of demonstrating lab skills, because they all master at different times and rates. And I think that it lends itself well to competency-based assessment. And I'm just really, my head's going wild with thinking about how we can break down even the smallest of skills, such as demonstrates therapeutic use of self with simulated clients. So,
and so in occupational therapy, what kind of skill would you want students to demonstrate about the badge on?
They would need to be able to demonstrate an assisted stand pivot transfer, not manufacturing, fabrication of a hand-based splint.
Fantastic. By the way, my PT and OT people, this is my favorite miming from another presentation that I do on copyright. But when I was 12, I always got sent to the principal's office because I was the class clown. Hard to believe, I know. And so the punishment was I had to make the copies. And so the stand pivot turn, that's exactly what it is. That is. Right? Who remembers this? We're making copies, right? What is it? A mimeograph machine, right? Yeah. tell what was an original and what was a copy? Because the original was crisp, it came out of a real printer, it was black and white, it was dry. The copies were these slightly moist and damp, fuzzy blue things. You know, I spent enough time with that mimeograph machine, and thank you for that awful memory, I'm very sorry. Because I must have lost, I don't know how many brain cells, the ink that they used really stank. Sorry, that's a flashback. But what else are you thinking about in terms of badging, in terms of where you might go, or what questions do you have about how you could apply it in your specific situation?
Well, I'm thinking about an application. So in my department, we do staff training and try to build modules, but they wouldn't have to be sequential modules, but let people kind of navigate through the competencies that they're ready to address and earn those badges just sort of as a mechanism to get through those, to get them to help them choose what modules they want to have.
Did you hear, Robert, if you're teaching a subject or you're working on faculty training, or if you have a piece of content that people don't have to go through in a certain order, then badges are a fantastic way to do that. You're absolutely right. And to build on what Robert was saying, if you ask your learners, whether it's colleagues or students, to earn competency-based badges in the things that they need to do, you can create one learning environment, one course, that allows people to pick and choose their specialties. And this is where, when we talk about badges, this is where the intellectual work that we do comes into play. I've been talking about the fun stuff. But the intellectual work that we have to do is to figure out, okay, if you've earned this cluster of 5 badges, you have demonstrated this larger skill set. If you've earned this cluster of 4 other badges, if you've earned this cluster of 6 badges that comes in between some of those, you've demonstrated these skill sets. And then allow people to build those skill sets up. This gets us very close to contract learning. And for those of you who have heard of contract learning but haven't really dived into it, contract learning allows us to ask students, what do you want to get out of my class? Then they say, I want to see. But if we give them an opportunity and say, okay, if you really do want to see, here's what you need to do, and here's what you need to demonstrate, and here are the levels you need to do it. You all laugh because that's kind of true, that, you know, I want to see. But if we say, if you're shooting for a C, here's what you do. And if you get better than that, awesome for you. And if that's what you really want to do, tell me what I need to know to get my piece of paper and move on, okay. And for those students who are motivated to go above and beyond, tell them how to do that. And that gets us into our contract learning badging. Probably got time for one more comment or question on badges. Well, maybe 2.
I call it collaborative training. My students get assigned throughout the semester. I assign them each a chapter that we work on, and so when we go in to have our study session for the final exam, I don't talk. They have to be an expert on whatever chapter. And I think this might be a better alternative. Because right now, I'll first give them the options to pick what chapters they want, and it seems like everybody really wants the chapters on like delinquency and gender, and nobody really wants the chapter on death penalty. So I'm thinking that maybe a better, if I do set up a badge system, then whatever you have those badges in, that's what you're going to be different.
So, Rhonda, your idea is collaborative cramming, being able to identify where people have skills way ahead of time so that you can slot them toward being those experts. Awesome idea. I'm sorry, there was a question over here.
I just had a question. Like typically for the badges, when somebody earns a badge or a set of badges, is it only that student that can see that, or is there like a virtual bulletin board that the whole class can see? Oh, Joe got 3 badges there.
The good question to ask, is it just that student who sees his or her badges, or is there a way to share that with the whole class? The answer is yes. Both. You can, and let me work along a continuum with you here. At the bare bones level, you don't have to use any formal system. You can just say, hey, when you earn an 80% on this, I will keep track in the grades tool and assign badges. And you can even have a grades column that is earned this one, earned that one. and you can have those grade columns be accessible only to the student or to the whole class. So that's the real simple, back of the napkin, I built this in my garage way to do it. Then along the continuum, there are the formal systems like Credly, like Mozilla Backpack, where you ask your students to sign up for a free account, and then you provide those badges, and you would have to get a badging account. There are some folks here in the room who can help you do that. All of our technology help folks, our sponsors here, they can help you figure out all those kinds of things, so it's not all the mental heavy lifting for you as the faculty member. But in that case, the world can see those badges. And one of my big successes at Northeastern Illinois was that we started to offer some of our computer science skill training to the wider world. And we have a number of programmers on the Indian subcontinent and in Europe who do not live near to a place where they can get these particular skills. And we are the lowest tuition state institution in Illinois, which means we're fairly affordable. And so we've got a lot of folks who never come to our campus, but who earn badges and certificates, and they go through Credly or they go through Mozilla Backpack, and they can show their employer, I earned these certificates from this United States institution. It's just as good as a diploma to them because it demonstrates a skill for which they want promotion or they want to raise at work. So that helps me build on your suggestion here. So the answer is yes, both. You can do it the simple, dead easy way, and you can also get more into it. So I encourage you to start out with, let me keep track of it manually in the grades tool, and you decide who sees what. By the way, turn it into a competition. And I don't know if you have one more thing to come in on this.
Well, I'm not sure I should be saying this.
Well, nothing leaves us.
You can
right?
use it. You can use it for assessment. They're always asking us to do a bunch of things for assessment. We can just say, hey, 80% or 10% of my class got 80% on this particular technique, and therefore only 20%. So next year we will reinforce this other topic, but do the feedback for reinforcing that topic.
And to take off on what Adolph is talking about, using it for assessment, that if 80% of my class got 80% or better on this topic, that means that SACS is satisfied, that I'm teaching that well, right? That means that when it's time to show my department chair and my dean that my teaching is effective, I have a shorthand method to say, well, everybody earned this badge. One of the things that you can build on there is getting agreement among all the people in your department to use a particular method, whether it's badging or some other thing. But, you know, it's why we have jobs, it's why we continue to have jobs. And so it's a great thing to talk about in terms of the assessment that's going on. And then actually, go ahead.
Before we leave the badging topic, I just happened to look up on D2L community site that there is a session this summer on D2L's badging service, which they don't currently have. So I imagine it's one of the new things that will be rolling out this year.
Yep, and that's Patrick is talking about a session at D2L Fusion, the annual conference for Desire to Learn on badging. They are rolling it out. I think it's Dan Semig who's leading that session.
That's given any as part of the session.
Fantastic. So if anybody is going to that, good commercial to have here. Let's keep moving here. I've got a couple of minutes left, and I want to roll through to the end. The next thing was a scavenger hunt. And this is another piece where we're asking students to come back in. And let me go into my discussions. By the way, there's my Unit 1 pizza and beer. And you'll notice lots of people are posting in it. Now I have 10 faculty members in this particular session. And when we talked about how do we create community in fully online courses, this was the topic that got the most number of responses. By the way, I only responded to about 1 in 8 or 1 in 10 of those. But this was the one that really caught people's interest. And here's why. Instead of just asking, how do you create an effective online learning community in your course, what I asked folks to do was construct a list of practices that you can use, but also go out and find examples of how other people are successful using this. This is the most basic level of a scavenger hunt that you can ask students to do. At your children's birthday parties, or remember back to when you were children and you attended the fun birthday parties, there was perhaps a scavenger hunt where you literally had a list of items. They do this in college now too. If you're joining a fraternity or sorority for some reason, they ask you to go around all the businesses in town and buy a beer here and get a chicken sandwich there and so on and so forth, and come back with a piece of sculpture from in front of the chancellor's house and all that kind of thing. Well, you never did that? Okay, maybe we buy some chicken and beer. Yeah, okay. But having a scavenger hunt is a very useful thing because it gives your learners categories, but it doesn't tell them things. And so you can have a scavenger hunt that's related to ideas. Go find someone who is a researcher or a scholar on this particular topic. Go interview someone. Call up, those of you who are early ed folks, call up a building principal or the person who runs a daycare center for the early childhood folks and ask them how they do certain things, how they handle challenging situations. And so a scavenger hunt can be for both ideas and things. Also for online scavenger hunts, I asked my faculty members in this course and I asked my undergraduate and graduate students to come back with pictures, images, ideas. Let me flip back over to our discussions here. I'll show you an example of that. Asking students, even if it's just bringing back clip art about how to set expectations, or bringing back images and ideas. This gets at what we're going to talk about, and I hope Alice and Philip also will be talking about in those universal design sessions that we're going to talk about later, where if all you're doing is text, you're missing an opportunity. Ask your students to go find pictures. And also, we do a meeting session on copyright and fair use. Your students are looking most of the time. So, in terms of doing scavenger hunts, though, the big question is, how much freedom do your students have to move around and do within the structure that you're giving them? So that's a little bit of a deeper dive for scavenger hunts. This is something I have to, it's confession time. When I work with faculty at my institution, I will share things like this. And then I'll see a faculty member in the hall. The faculty member will come up to me and say, "Tom, you'll never guess. Do you know those online tips that you talked about? I tried them in my face-to-face class, and they work there too." And I have to keep a straight face and say, "Really? I'll remember that." So this is something that is not only for D2L, but works really well in D2L because it's one place where, as the last question we had in the other topic, where students can bring what they know and do, and other students can see them do it in a way that you couldn't do in a face-to-face class. So ideas that are popping up, questions, comments, in terms of scavenger hunt, especially if you go to board.
One of the things that I have my students do, because I teach HR management, and interview questions are always one of those things. How do you come up with a good question? And so I ask them to go and to find examples of questions. And they can be either a question that shouldn't be asked or that should be asked, so that they're creating their own questions. And they really like that, and some of them actually have been asked questions where they're not really certain whether they're legal or not legal.
So we've all been through the employment interview, and Kathy is talking about that secret devil assignment we were talking about here. She says in her HR course, if I'm hearing you right, you ask your students to put together a list of interview questions. And I'm sitting down here because I really want the job.
Okay.
And you know, I have the background, and I'm a hard worker, and I'm a team player, and I know all the buzzwords to say. And by the way, let me tell you about my gender, my ethnicity, what are the other things you can't ask me about? My religious beliefs, those kinds of things. But what Kathy is getting at is actually a really great way to do a scavenger hunt, which is don't go and find examples that are right, but go and find examples that are completely wrong, and tell me why. Or go and find examples that are a mishmash, and then ask everybody else in the class to figure out which is an even higher level of thinking. We're thinking about Bloom's taxonomy. We've got understand and know down at the bottom, but apply and differentiate is way up toward the top. And so asking your students to come up with good and poor examples, mix them up, and then ask students to respond to each other and say, oh yeah, I think this is right, I think that's not. And like you said, Kathy, share this with everybody in the back row too. That gets students asking questions about, well, what about this question that might be in the middle? What about this thing that I can't really categorize? And that creates more conversation. So fantastic example here.
This is not a
Yes.
This is not a class that I taught. The class I took. We had to watch. We were over here by the bullet pack, and we had to watch Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. Okay? And in this sequence, they show a video of Joe Pesci trying to get into the house. We had to identify, not because he was tripping, following, and all that. We had to identify the same acts that he did in that segment of them trying to break into his house. What did he do safely? It was the safety part of the training supervisors, okay? It was a trainer class, but we had to go in there, and it makes you think a whole different way. I mean, you can see him falling down steps, but you know, as he was trying to climb up to get into the back door of that town hall, he moved some lumber over it to clear his path. He grabbed hold of the handrail, which is what you're supposed to do when you climb the steps. But to sit there and just think about, you know, it's funny to laugh and you see all the silliness going on, but to think about, was there any safe elements in there? And so it makes you think about it in a whole different way.
So, Mike, if I'm hearing you correctly, first, Mike started off with something that I very seldom hear. I was at professional development at the bullet factory. Okay, yeah, the big bullets. Yeah, we are here in Oak Ridge, City, I know. But Mike talked about he had to attend a safety training, and they watched a scene from Home Alone 2 in New York, where Joe Pesci was trying to break into the house, and the task was watch this film clip and identify what he did safely as he's falling down the stairs and putting a hand through the window and accidentally getting paint dumped on his head and various other things. And so a scavenger hunt doesn't necessarily need to be go out into the wider world. It can be examine this small thing. By the way, if you want to do something similar to what Mike is talking about with films or film clips and asking students to identify what happened right, go to RottenTomatoes.org, and it's a film review website that has clips of the best and worst of things, and you can find some really bad things. Mike has also inadvertently told you one thing that I didn't mean to tell you, and that is the secret of all comedy. It's two rights and a wrong. The reason that Joe Pesci trying to break into the house is funny is that he does do some things right. He walks up to the steps and there's some lumber there that he could trip on. And the audience is going, he's going to trip on that lumber. But he moves aside. He tries to go up the steps and people say he's going to fall on, smash his nose into those steps. But he uses the handrail. And then when the audience says, oh, this isn't a funny scene, then the funny thing happens. So it's always two wrongs and a right. Two rights and a wrong. Excuse me. And I'm good with that. So, what else in terms of scavenger hunts? You guys have any ideas things you want to explore, questions you want to ask. I've got two good ones to start us off. I see a few people looking up and to the right. They're accessing their database.
I'm thinking about, I coach women's basketball team. I'm thinking about using it with our incoming freshmen and our sophomores to split them up into groups and let them get acclimated to the campus a little bit. Maybe have them go and get photo IDs and library cards and different things around the campus. That way they kind of kills many birds with one stone, I think.
Absolutely. And the idea of a scavenger hunt is originally go to various physical locations and do things. So being able to find out, oh, wait, by the way, how many of your students know who their advisors are? That's a good thing to put in the scavenger hunt. Figure out who your advisor is. Send that person an email message. So excellent suggestion here in terms of working on a physical scavenger hunt. The other fun thing is, if you've got, like with your women's basketball team, if you have got 70 different things that you want people to know about, but you don't want to send them on a 70-part scavenger hunt, send 10 teams on a 7-part scavenger hunt and have them report back. Hey, I found out where the registrar is. Hey, I found out where to get your ID cards. And instead of having them use software or what have you, take a picture and then draw a map on paper and post a picture of that. And then that becomes a resource for your class, and they made it. So fantastic suggestion.
In the library, I've seen twists on this where students come to the library and they have to demonstrate some skill, and they're working pairs, and somebody videos somebody else doing something in place. And so that's kind of interesting. It's like, how do you find the library? Okay, they come and do this little video about this, and they want to say.
So you have pairs of students working, one person doing the work, one person doing the reporting and filming. Yeah, documenting the process. And by the way, I started out saying you know how to do a lot of these things already. That is an awesome example of instructor presence, where the student's doing the instruction. And it's an awesome way to keep students engaged. And it means that you now have something that you can ask those students permission and say, this one was really good. Can I use this as an example next time? Can we put this one up on the library's website so that other students can see it? And people take pride in that. So fantastic. Let's go to our last one here, and I'll make sure we get to moving on time here. And that last one is the syllabus quiz. Let me just double check and make sure this one's the right one here. Yep. And this one is the thing that bugs the heck out of faculty members at my institution probably the most. But it's also something that almost everybody adopts. Now, you folks know in Desire to Learn, this is one of my favorite parts of Desire to Learn. How many of you folks in the past have had students say, could you reset my final exam or my quiz? My internet dropped, my house was struck by lightning, thieves stole all the cable from the outside of my house just as I was about to take it. And someone said ice storm. Yeah, I was here for that. So one of the things that D2L allows us to move away from is the, oh, I accidentally started thing. Because first, when you click on the thing that says take the quiz, you come to a page like this. And then when you say start the quiz, it says you are about to begin a quiz. Are you sure? And then you click a third time to actually start. And so if a student accidentally clicked 3 times in different parts of the screen, go ahead and believe it. But I don't even call this the syllabus quiz. I just say quiz number 1. And in the directions it says you will be able to find all of the answers to these questions in the syllabus. And this one is specific to faculty members who are going to be teaching online courses. You can adapt this for your undergraduate and other learning situations. At a minimum, how many days should you log into the online teaching course and post to our discussions? So how often should you participate in our class? Where will you find detailed instructions for all of our weekly assignments and activities? Where can you find the readings and files you'll need in order to complete the assignments for each unit? I'm devious, by the way. All of these could be right. How many graded discussion topics To how many graded discussion topics should you respond each week? By the way, at least 2. And you'll be working in 2 different shells. In which one will you participate in our discussions and receive your grades? Where should you look here? In ours, in the one you're teaching in your master shell where students never go. We have a system like that at our institution. And so you'll notice this isn't terribly involved. But the answers here mean that everybody has to look at least each section of the syllabus that we deem as important. I would never give a syllabus quiz that asks about very rare things. So, I would never say, what should you do if you get sick and you can't come to class? That's in the syllabus, but that's also something where they'll be motivated to find out. I'll ask questions like, where should you turn in your work? In some classes, that's hand me a piece of paper. In some classes, that's show me a link to a YouTube or to a Dropbox account or a place where you put your piece of software or your code that you wrote. In some instances, that's use the Dropbox feature in the learning management system. But that syllabus quiz, everything that your students, ask questions about on the first day of class, which is almost nothing, right? You go through the syllabus and you say, do you understand? And they'll go, right? And B, all of those things where your students goof it up during the semester. Oh, by the way, Professor, I'm going on vacation for 3 weeks during the May semester, and I'm wondering how I can make that up, right? So you have to put into the syllabus quiz. What do you do if you have unexpected absences from class versus what do you do if you have planned things? Should you be in the class at all? Should you be working on your time management? Those kinds of things. But those are questions that you can ask that get students thinking about the expectations for how they will be students in your class. And that's going to change. In terms of Margaret's class, Mike's class, Shelley's class, Rhonda's class. You're all going to have slightly different expectations because you teach different subjects, because you have a number of different expectations of students. But if you can get at those core expectations in the syllabus quiz, you're going to see who's got it and who doesn't. And the best part, you can go and see in your statistics for the quiz. And while this loads, you can see who got which questions right and which questions wrong. You can see, okay, everybody 100% on question number 5. Everybody knows what the late policy is in my class. But not everybody knows on question 1 where they need to go in order to take part in our online discussions. And especially if those online discussions are supporting a face-to-face class, this is something that's critical. Because if you're flipping your classroom, if you're doing application in the face-to-face version, and then most of your conversation and interacting with the materials is online, if your students demonstrate to you that they're not real sure where they should go to have that conversation, this is time for you to intervene and talk with them. So you've got, if you're designing your syllabus quiz with those things in mind, you'll get good responses quickly, right off the bat. It usually takes us until about halfway through the semester to figure this stuff out. This preloads it for you so you can head that stuff off at the pass. That is the deep dive on the syllabus quiz. Questions, ideas, where do you want to take it? Especially if you voted for it. Or anything you've heard you want to underline or say, I already do that and it's working.
I do a syllabus quiz.
Yeah.
But the problem that I initially, well, I tried doing it in class. We used soccer gym, so we were just going to do it right then so that I could, because I refuse to go with the syllabus the first day of class. I will do it. They have it, they can read. If they can't read, then that's not my problem in criminal justice. It's a problem in another classroom. But the problem that I got having was that even with us sitting there in class, doing it, they would look at me, especially in the classes where I'm on 8 campuses at once. The campus that I have in front of me is doing it. And then 5 out of the other 7 are like this, looking at me. And it's, well, I don't have it. I don't have it. And it ended up, it has become a drain in my class.
Yeah, that's actually where I wanted to go if you didn't say it, is here's the darkest secret of all professional developers and faculty development. We say lots of good things, and faculty members often implement those good things. And they say, here is bonus or extra, or here's something that's not worth any credit. What will your students do in your class? What's worth points? So making this, I'd have 2 different ways that I would take your level, where you have them doing their syllabus quiz in class, and then it's worth a grade. I would up the game one way, and that is make it worth points and don't spend time on it in class. Ask them to do it after that first class period. And you want to jump in here too?
I'm just going to make a quick comment. I did the same thing with my online classes. We have to post LDAs or last day of attendance within 5-7 days, whatever the week is. I make the syllabus quiz what I use for their attendance run. They have to actually, whether they drop it the next day or not, they actually have to take that syllabus quiz.
Yeah, and SAC says you can't just go by when they log in. You have to actually say they're actually taking an academically significant action is what SACs and Higher Learning Commission say. So fantastic idea there for LDA as well, for last day of attendance. So, but I wouldn't make them sit there and suffer through it in real time, because for a syllabus quiz to be effective, those students who are sitting there like this, if it's worth points, yes, and if they can do it on their own time, then they can work through the syllabus, and those people who need a couple minutes to read through can take a couple minutes to read through. And there's no stigma or shame, you know, oh, I'm in class and everybody else is on the 5th one and I'm only on the 3rd one. So I move that to a different level too.
When I started doing it, that was when I first flipped all my classes. So the goal was to get them to understand, when you walk in this door, you better know what I had already told you that you had to read. So it was that first introduction of, oh, wow, she really meant when she says you better read your syllabus before you come to class. Because that was, I took attendance and then, all right, we're going to do this right now.
Fantastic.
And I got about 15 that went.
For those of you in the back, she's making the very large-eyed surprise face, Steve.
Yeah.
Right?
It's the, oh, wow, she did that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's all part of everything we're talking about today is setting expectations, telling your students, here's how we're going to do it. Here's what we're going to do. We are all really good experts in our fields. And the subtext underneath that expertise is that we know what we're talking about. And because that's true, students trust us implicitly. They walk in the door and they say, expert. And because you have that expertise, take advantage of that. Ask your students, tell your students what you expect them to do and how, and by and large, they'll do it. And there, you were going to jump in a little while earlier, too.
Y'all went exactly where I wanted to go.
Awesome.
We're running exactly where I wanted to go. There's the idea of, because I did syllabus quizzes when syllabus quizzes weren't cool. Way off. And I did it for, all the same things. But over the years, I've just kind of seen students don't do optional. Yep. Students don't do optional. And I don't like the idea of bonus, because if you do a syllabus quiz as bonus or extra credit, the very student that you need, Buffy, you need Buffy to take the syllabus quiz, because Buffy has no idea when the tests are, what the late policy is there an attendance policy. It's Buffy that you wanted to take the syllabus quiz, not Ken. And Ken's got a perfect 100. He's always the one that's going to take the syllabus quiz for extra credit. Your extra credit is that if you do it as extra credit or a bonus, it's 5-point treat to the student who's already got 103 average. I don't need him over there. I need Buffy. Give me Buffy in there.
So if you remember nothing else from our time today, what we're, and this is, I'm kind of joking, but I'm kind of not, is what Darren is talking about is the reason to adopt universal design for learning. And this is going to be some of the sessions that you'll be doing later on today and tomorrow. So awesome segue for us here right now.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Has anybody done the syllabus quiz a second time later in the semester? Because I have, we have students and they read all this the first day and they remember it. Has anybody tried it a few weeks later?
Well, that's actually what I was getting at with bet on the syllabus as one of the strategies, and I'll tell you a little bit about what I mean here. Has anybody given the syllabus quiz at midterm? Just to remind them. And I tend not to do that because they've already seen it and the sort of surprise and shock value is gone. That, I agree that it is a great strategy, and the way that I tune it a little bit along the lines of what you want to do is I tell my students, what is the section of the syllabus that people will forget about first? And then those people who bet on this section, that section, the other section, whenever somebody has a question about those sections of the syllabus, I point those students to the experts who were betting on it. And they end up with points, or the person who can answer that question for the student ends up with some kind of credit that isn't an assignment credit, like being able to put a question on the test, or like being able to drop a lower grade, or something along those lines that I might have already done for everybody else. So being able to reinforce, tell them, told them, is a fantastic way to do it. And no matter whether you use your approach or mine, it's definitely going to make it stick for the students. The only reason that I don't really tend to repeat stuff like that is, I don't know about all of you, but at my institution, when we're teaching, we have so many little administrative things to do that it seems like there's less time for teaching. And so as much as I can do more teaching and make my administrative workload go, hey, take this thing, and I don't know if you talked about with badges, hey, we could use this for accreditation, and just check off the box. The more I can do that, the more I can make the administrative stuff more efficient, the more time I have to actually interact with my students and engage with my students. So I really love the direction in which you're going here. So, and it was merited, right? All right, awesome. I'm getting there. All right, so those are 3 deeper dives. And I want to wrap up here real quick. And think a little bit. We had that slide about who the winners are. Those were our 3. I want to make you a promise, and then I want to say I want to talk with you individually afterwards. Here's the promise. I've done all 104 of these things. How did I come up with 104 things? It's a dumb thing, but it worked really well. The very first time I gave this presentation, it was at a conference that happened on October 4th. So if you write 10/4 on the board, and you take out the slash, I said, I want to do like a rapid fire, this is just an onslaught of good things, and then see what comes out of it. That's how I came up with 104. This could have been 50, this could have been 300. No one would invite me to talk about 300. I'm surprised people invite me to talk about 104, but we do it. And in terms of that promise, I promise you, if you choose 2 or 3 of these things and try them out, you will figure out what works for your style, your approach, what works best for your students, and you won't drive yourself nuts trying to do a million things at once. So that's my promise. Also, over the years as I've done these and I do these deeper dives, I record them and I post them online. And so at the end of this conference, I'll give Susan the links to all of those. So if you voted for something and we didn't get to it, chances are it's already online. I've got a little 4-minute video for you that's a deeper dive into a lot of these other things. So I want to give that as a life after our conversation today. So really what we're talking about is this kind of a concept. Those of you who are smiling know what this is.
Paradigm shift.
Paradigm shift, that's right. We are changing the way that we are approaching what we do with our students. Not our subject matter expertise, not the connections that we make with our students, because that's why we have jobs. Our students get to know us, we get to know our students, we take great pride in helping them to achieve their goals, to get jobs, to put them into places where they can move on and be successful. I mean, you know, it's nice to get a paycheck. And it's really nice when I see my students and they come back later on and they say, you know what, you helped me. You don't get a lot of them, but every once in a while you get a few that come back and say, you know, you made a difference. And that is what I want you to come away with from this session today. So thank you, everybody. You have been an engaged and informed and fun audience. Thank you, thank you, thank you.